Okay, so I'm Stacy Bass, and you have joined us today for the Stormwater Management Plan webinar, so we can tell you all about our stormwater program. Our presenter today is Tyler
Villaborgi.
Villaborgi. I just had a yes, Villaborgi, and he is an environmental program specialist with the City of Mesa. So I'm going to turn it over to Tyler, and I'm going to share my screen so you can see his presentation. And let's do it this way, maybe. Nope. Okay. Did that? Didn't work. There we go. All right. So you should be able, everybody should be able to see the presentation.
Yeah. Looks like we're starting the second slide, which is fine. The first slide's just the basic introduction that we already did. So good day. Thank you for joining us. My name is Tyler Villaborgi. As Stacy mentioned, I'm an environmental program specialist with the City of Mesa. And I'm here today to talk about stormwater, what we do, what stormwater is, why it's important, and what the City of Mesa management plan is for it. Next slide.
Maybe.
So most important thing to note about well, first of all, stormwater, it's pretty much exactly what you'd expect it to be. It's rainwater that travels across the land until it reaches a lake or a river. Um, Most important thing to know about municipal stormwater is it doesn't really follow the same path that urban stormwater does. Out in nature, stormwater is going to travel across the land. It's going to interact with native soils, natural soils, forests, plants. It's going to flow at a slower rate. Pollutants that are in the natural environment, rainwater, are going to get filtered out naturally through that process. Whereas in the city, we've paved a lot of the environment. Stormwater flows faster, much more of it flows rather than soaks into the ground. It's just a changed environment. And we also need to move stormwater around because we don't want it damaging property that we have. We don't want it damaging and flooding houses and businesses. And we need to get it out of the streets so that during rain events, it's still safe to drive. So we've developed a transportation system. Every major city built in the modern era has a stormwater transportation system that conveys this water away from the built environment into lakes and rivers. Important thing to note is that this system does not have water treatment on it, unlike the sanitary sewer. As you see in the slide, it's noting that the two systems are distinctly separate. Storm or sewer water goes to treatment plants. Stormwater does not go to treatment plants. Older communities, there was some combination of them. The reason we don't do this is when storm events happen, the large influx of water can overflow the treatment plants, causing a major discharge of pollutants. So it's better to keep them separate and ensure that our sanitary sewer is always treated at the expense that our stormwater is not treated. One thing to note, you notice on the slide, it says municipal storm sewer, separate sewer system, MS4. I will be referring to these systems just as the MS4 for the rest of the presentation. Here in City of Mesa, most of our stormwater goes to the Salt or Gila rivers, or a large portion that actually makes it to retention basins, which will then percolate into the groundwater. Some of the connections to those rivers are through other conveyances like the Eastern Maricopa Floodway or ADOT conveyances, but eventually all the surface water does make it to the Salt or Gila rivers. Now, out here, we think of these rivers as just dry rivers, but in fact, there's a large amount of water flowing them at any given time below the surface. In some places, there's as much as hundreds of feet of sediment, gravel, sand that is porous and has groundwater actually flowing down the channel. So when we discharge our stormwater to these rivers, which on the surface look dry, they're actually entering an underground river system, and all the pollutants that we convey with those will enter that system and travel downstream. Where In the case of the Gila and Salt, they recombine on the west side of the valley. They travel down by Gila Bend and then on towards Yuma, where that river system eventually connects to the Colorado, and then into the Pacific Ocean via the Gulf of California down by Baja. There are countless communities between here and there that rely on the groundwater or the water that's in that underground river system, and a bunch of agricultural interests as well. Um, and when it goes into park basins, it's also a place where standing water might have children playing. The community can interact with water that's in the stormwater basins. Um, so that's why it's important to protect your stormwater. On this side, we'll describe a number of the common pollutants that enter our stormwater. Out here, we're going to see oils and greases, antifreeze, coolants, brake dust, tire particles from equipment and vehicles. We have trash and litter from throughout the city. These might introduce microplastics or carry with them other contaminants or impact ecosystems down the way, or just generally cause pollution, litter backups in the storm drain system itself or later down the lakes and rivers. There's chemicals that are commonly used throughout the urban environment, such as pesticides, herbicides, fertilizers, paints and solvents are commonly used that enter stormwater. One of the major contaminants of water systems is bacteria and viruses. They are present in the stormwater coming out of urban environments, and they can make lakes or rivers unsafe to recreate on. Dirt and sediment might not sound like a pollutant, but it's actually one of the major ones, as sediment can impact the aquatic ecosystems. Too much sediment can change the amount of oxygen available, harm fish or aquatic life, or it can also be a conveyor of other pollutants that get attached to those particles. And then we have industrial sites, which are going to have things like heavy metals, solvents, hydrocarbons, PFAS, other volatiles. That doesn't say all industrial sites have it, but those are the types of pollutants that we might find from industrial sites. It's useful to break the sources into general categories. For this, we are looking at industrial, residential, or commercial as the primary categories, and this slide notes the common pollutants found in those. But it's also useful to consider that we have sort of a general urban area. Mostly, we're looking at transportation infrastructure as the pollutant sources for the general areas, but those are generally where urban pollutants come from. Now, recognizing that we have these pollutant sources that can enter waters of the US, we realized that it was important to protect them, and we had to develop a system to protect them. Back in the 1950s and 60s, we were observing some major impacts to waters of the US throughout the country. Fish, birds, wildlife were dying. Lakes and rivers were turning bright and unnatural colors. And even a few rivers caught fire, famously the Chattanooga River in Cincinnati. That was a major event in getting momentum to pass the Clean Water Act. So in 1972, Congress passed the first major federal regulation protecting water in the US from pollutants. And it primarily focused on industrial discharges, think pipes coming directly out of a factory, or sewage discharges. And as crazy as it sounds now, prior to 72, it was not entirely uncommon for raw, untreated sewage to just flow into rivers or into the oceans. There are some places that had treatment plants, but after 72, it became a requirement. These revisions or these regulations did a lot to clean up the waters in our country. However, it wasn't enough. And we started observing that many rivers and lakes were still not meeting the standards that we had found out were necessary to protect the public from unsafe pollutant exposures. And we realized that a lot of these pollutants, although they were no longer coming from the direct pipes or the sewage treatment plants, there were other sources. And what was happening was they were being exposed to rain, and the rain was carrying these other pollutants from these sites into the lakes and rivers. So In 1987, the water quality amendments were passed that included stormwater, and they implemented a permitting system. So large industrial sites of particular types, large construction sites, and large municipalities were required to get permits in order to discharge their stormwater. If you For industrial sites, you will see examples like airports, landfills, metal recycling, automotive recycling, vehicle maintenance places. Construction, it's any place that's disturbing more than 1 acre of earth. And for cities, the first phase of the first group of cities required to get permits were those over 100,000 people. Later, they added a range from 10,000 to 100,000, which were they called the phase twos. These cities generally had less pollution and less industry. They also had more simple permits. City of Mesa is a phase one permitted city, so we have one of the more complicated and stringent permits. The permit requires the city to develop ordinances. So in addition to the federal regulations, residents and operators in the city of Mesa are going to be subject to ordinance that restricts the discharge of pollutants into our stormwater system. This can be found in Title 8, Chapter 5 of the Mesa City Code. This section details all things related to stormwater pollution. In addition to requiring ordinances, we are required to develop a management plan. And the management plan essentially summarizes all of the other activities that we're going to be doing here in the city. So in addition to city ordinances, we're going to have a street and storm drain cleaning schedule. We're going to perform good housekeeping at city-owned facilities and audit them routinely to ensure that city-owned and operated facilities aren't discharging stormwater themselves. We train city employees. We offer opportunities for the public to collect their household hazardous waste so that people aren't tempted to just pour it out outside or dump it. We provide education and outreach to the community so that they understand what's expected of them and why it's important, as well as what the options available to them are. We have industrial and construction inspection programs, a discharge elimination program. We conduct routine stormwater monitoring, and we have this workshop and the plan. So for the public outreach, there's a number of different ways that we provide information to the community, but one of the more interesting is AZ Storm. And it's a regional group that we are a member of, as well as many of the other cities in the valley that have stormwater programs, phase two, phase one permits. And these communities gather resources and elect to spend them cooperatively to develop educational materials that we could hand out to the general public, as well as develop messaging that we disseminate through social media, traditional media, digital media, a number of different ways that we try to educate the community that you can't put pollutants into the storm drains, as well as what the options are available to them. In addition to outreach, we have different ways that the public can participate here in the city. One of the best is just reporting issues that you observe. If you see something that's concerning, somebody dumping chemicals into the storm drain, you can report that to the city of Mesa via our hotline at 480-644 3955. We'll have that later in the presentation, as well as web-based reporting and complaints. Then we have this very meeting here where we get to talk about and give feedback on the plan. In addition to this, we have the discharge detection elimination program, which is where our staff will go out through the city, look at the storm drains during dry weather times when there should be no stormwater flow, and look for signs of other flow. So if we see water flowing when it's dry, that means that water's coming from somewhere, and we could trace it down and figure out if it's an allowed discharge. Now, there are allowed discharges. Or if it's something we should be concerned about. And if it is something we are concerned about, we'll work with the source to figure out a way to eliminate any potential pollutant discharges from that. When we're looking at city facilities, We are looking at housekeeping practices and best management practices at the facility. On this slide, you'll see some examples of secondary containment and spill kits and proper storage and labeling, which we use to prevent materials that we house here at the city from getting in contact with stormwater. And then for industrial, private industrial and private construction sites, we have an inventory of facilities that need to be inspected. And we've identified industrial sites that are likely to discharge pollutants here in the city. We have an inventory of construction sites. And we go out, we visit them, we look for compliance with the city code, and we have direct contact with the operators of this facility so we can give them education and support materials so that they can find the most effective way to conduct business without discharging pollutants into the stormwater. As mentioned, we visit construction sites. In addition to inspecting them, we also have a plan review process. So before a construction site even begins, we are making sure that they have a stormwater plan, that they have proper permitting, and that their grading and drainage plan is set up to meet city code. Now, city code for drainage and grading and drainage plans also requires typically on-site retention or various different on-site stormwater management systems. This process also improves the stormwater quality. So by having robust development standards, anything that's newly built in the city is going to be less likely to discharge pollutants. And we have a system where we can follow up on those. One of the final areas that we're going to discuss in this presentation is our monitoring. We mentioned we do monitoring. We have 5 different sites throughout the city where we collect stormwater samples during the wet weather events, and we analyze them. What we see here is an aggregate of about 11 years worth of data at one of these sites. This was showing the number of times, percentage of times that we pulled a sample that we had an exceedance of standards of these different parameter types. So we were monitoring for hundreds of parameters. And over these 11 years, we really only found 4 parameters that we regularly exceeded on. We did very regularly exceed on some of them, for example, copper here. So recognizing that these are ubiquitous pollutants and that our preventative methods aren't going to have a lot that we can do to minimize the amount of copper, zinc, lead, and E. coli that we're receiving at these sites, we started looking into retrofits. This is also a permit requirement, but what we're doing here is bringing in a outside expert to evaluate several different drainage areas in the city that correspond with some of our analytical data, areas that we know had problems for these ubiquitous pollutants, and look at what proactive physical features we can install in our system. Right now, it's just a feasibility study. They're looking at retrofits like bioswales. There are additional retention, sedimentation basins that slow the water velocity so particulates can drop out of them, various different other devices like that that can feasibly be installed in the existing system within the land constraints and budget constraints that the city has that may improve water quality. So that's something that we're very excited. The consultants that we have on board is delivered a draft report. We are evaluating it right now, and we're getting ready to move forward with it. So that's a brief overview of the stormwater management program that we have here at the City of Mesa. There's a lot of details that we didn't have a chance to get into, but we just wanted to give a broad overview of what we're looking at. And now would be a time to ask questions. So Stacy, if any of our guests here would like to ask questions, if you can unmute them and let them go, I'm happy to field anything we have. Stacy, you are muted right now.
You should be getting a request that says, I'm asking you to unmute. Let's see if we can. Um,
Thanks for being patient. We're new to using Zoom. We usually use a different provider for these types of meetings. So there's some technical things we're working with.
all right. You should all have gotten a request that says you can unmute if you want to ask us a question. I see Antonio is unmuted and Jackie's unmuted, but Derek and Mike are still muted. So,
Well, we're presenting mostly to folks who were familiar with this program, so they may not have any questions right now. If that's the
yep.
case, I suggest we wrap up, give everybody another minute here to chime in if you have a question.
And feel free to put it in the chat too if there's any questions you want us to answer. Okay, I'm going to take that as a no questions.
All right,
Tyler,
excellent.
then I'm going to go ahead and we'll thank everybody
Okay.
for attending. We appreciate your support. And
Two notes. I was mistaken. The hotline number is not in the last slide, so I will repeat it right now. That is 480-644-3599. Is that correct? If somebody correct me if I just said the wrong number. 3599. And we will be posting this online. So somebody out there may be watching this recorded. If you do have questions, you can email our group environ.info@mesaaz.gov. Thank you very much, and look forward to working with the community to keep our waters and rivers clean.
thank you, Tyler.
Thanks, Tyler.